An atheist might say, well, God is all-knowing. So even if an atheist personally doesn't know what would convince him, God knows what would convince him. And therefore, God could just show that person the evidence he needs, and he won't be ignorant about God anymore.
Of course!
I have no idea specifically what would change my mind about the existence of a God. But if there is such a being as a God, then one would think that God knows exactly what would change my mind and should be capable of taking the action to present the case that would change my mind. And this hasn't happened.
I can't wait to see how he says that this is bullshit. Aren't you excited? I'm so excited. I wish I had alcohol.
I think one way to address these objections is to shift the question away from what evidence would convince you that God exists to what evidence would make it reasonable for someone to believe God exists.
Oh, fuck off, you fucking scumbag piece of shit. Well, what do you think would be reasonable to someone else then? Well, if we just make it a bit easier for me. That's all this video is about, is being pissy that atheists have made his job of being an apologist harder. So why can't we just all argue in the simplistic way that would make it easier for him? Wah, you simple bitch. Well, one way. Of course it's one way to deal with it. It's great how you can put it across as there's many ways, but you don't really want to go into it. You just want to make it seem that way, right? Because, well, it's pretty fucking obvious that, hey, it's not atheists that said God knows everything. It's you fucks, right? And it isn't atheists that said God does miraculous things. It's you fucks. And it isn't atheists that said that God answers prayer. It's you fucks! So when we use your fucking logic to say that actually this is all really fucking stupid, and if God wanted to change my mind, he would know how to do it because he's an all-knowing, all-powerful being that can do anything that was within his bounds. And changing my mind was within his bounds. Just because I don't know what would prove my mind to prove to me that your God exists doesn't mean that if he is real, he wouldn't. But no, you're not supposed to put God to the test because God doesn't answer things unless it's selfish and for money or whatever.
You go to hell! You go to hell and you die!
You know, it's the George Carlin bit, isn't it?
What can we do to silence these Christian athletes who thank Jesus whenever they win, never mention his name when they lose? Not a word. You never hear him say, Jesus made me drop the ball. The good Lord tripped me up behind the line of scrimmage. According to these guys, Jesus is undefeated. Meanwhile, these assholes are in last place. Must be another one of those miracles.
You see, being convinced of something, being convinced seems to be almost a matter of like personal taste.
Duh! And considering we're talking about a God that you can't say is unfalsifiable and there's no way you can test, it's the best you're gonna get! Just because we're not all diehard fervent believers like fucking... No, I can't say words like that. People get angry. Just because people are deluded idiots like you who want to believe in anything regardless and think that you have all the proof because you were personally convinced, well, that is your subjective opinion, isn't it? Why is it not a subjective opinion when you agree with the proof? Why is it only a subjective opinion if an atheist agrees with the proof? Is it because you already believe it and you want to believe that you're higher than holy and you were already at the fucking top from the beginning? It's always great how these fuckers, they think like, well, you know, we've set a line down in the sand, and they take a moment to put themselves on the appropriate side. Because of course they're being fair and unbiased. You know, he hasn't begged people to argue in a different way and to not say things that they think. He wants them to argue in his way and to say things that he thinks they should say because he, like Braxton Hunter, knows better, doesn't he?
Moreover, I've never ever been an atheist, and I'm completely aware this is going to sound smug, even though I don't mean it that way. But the reality is, I think I understand the arguments for and defenses of atheist positions better than most atheists I know. And I'm probably older than you are. So ease up there, Ace. Everyone's tempted to think they're an expert.
For example, I could ask Matt Dillahunty, how would you know that what convinced you that God exists actually gave you a good reason to believe God exists?
Yeah, when we do that to you and you go, the ontological argument or whatever bullshit, you get angry because we laugh at you. The idea that someone like Matt Dillahunty is intellectually honest enough to say he doesn't know because he probably doesn't think that there is anything, but that if God is real, and according to your rules, he's all-powerful and all-knowing, you should be able to do it. And you get all butthurt because there's no argument out of the way for you for that one, except to trying to call into question their reasoning. So, well, why would you believe that then? And it's like, motherfucker, why are you trying to stop people from believing in your fucking religion? Like, what is your good reason? Who are you to demand good reasons from anyone for believing?
Do you not know who I am? He must not know who I am. I'm the juggernaut, bitch.
It's so silly. Well, he said he'd believe in God for this, but it's not the way I want him to believe in God, so I need to call it into question.
I mean, people are often convinced of false things. So the fact that something convinces Matt Dillahunty to believe, it doesn't mean it's a good reason.
Right, and of course you, Trent Horne, have all the good reasons, right? You went and you found all the good reasons, right? You ignored all the bad reasons and only went for good reasons. All of your reasons for believing in God are 100% holy and pure, right? Fuck off.
Saying that what would convince Matt Dillahunty to believe is just what would convince him is circular. It reduces the debate over God's existence to whether certain external observations merely cause us to have convincing internal feelings rather than following a process of reasoning.
Yeah, you just gotta follow a process of reasoning, and it's gonna be my process of reasoning, because there's plenty of other processes of reasoning that could bring you to be an atheist, they could bring you to be a deist, they could bring you to be a pantheist, they could bring you to be a Hindu, or a Buddhist, or a Muslim, or a Jainist, or a Zoroastrian, or a Samaritan, or like anything. There's so many different lines of fucking reasoning, you biased prick! Just do my line of reasoning.
That's why I think it's better to ask whether certain beliefs are reasonable or unreasonable, and then use our reason to follow the arguments made in favor of those beliefs to see if either one of the premises is not true, or we have no good reason to think it's true, or there's been an error in the reasoning or a fallacy.
Just don't do that to any of my arguments, though.
After all, you can think something is reasonable even if it doesn't convince you. And that seems to take us more into the domain of reason than the domain of feelings.
Well, you can have the feeling that it's reasonable, and then that can bring you out. Wait, is that what he actually said? After all, you can think something's reasonable, and that brings you into reason and not feelings. You think it, though, because thinking is feeling. It ain't reason, dickhead. We take it on faith, and faith is a good feeling. But don't take it on feelings, take it on reason. And use my reasoning, because we have a step-by-step program of how you should reason. And the answers feel right? Simple, easy intuitive answers for hard, non-intuitive questions. Reason.
For example, in his conversation with fellow atheist Alex O'Connor, Matt Dillahunty said that even though he isn't convinced to become an ethical vegan, he thinks there's nothing unreasonable in Alex adopting ethical veganism. Although that's not quite how Matt put it when I asked him about it in our recent debate on the resurrection of Jesus.
Do you think ethical veganism that Alex endorses is unreasonable?
Yes. I would never. So I don't have a problem with veganism, which was one of the reasons why this keeps coming up. As a matter of fact,
do you think ethical veganism that Alex endorses is unreasonable?
Yes.
I think you said at one point that you do consider it to be a moral virtue. You think it is a good thing?
I am convinced that it's likely a moral virtue. Okay. I know people who do it for health reasons. I know people who do it for ethical reasons, and I don't have any objection. My lone objection was to ethical vegans who say, if you eat meat, you are an immoral person.
Yeah. For the record, I don't think you're an immoral person for eating meat. I just think that what you're doing is immoral. Now,
I can see.
Do you think ethical veganism that Alex endorses is unreasonable?
Yes.
So, he says to thingy that he has no problem with his thing. And then you asked if ethical veganism is unreasonable. he said yes. It's almost like they're not the same thing. It's almost like being reasonable and having a problem with them. Two different things. And the thing that he said he had a problem with, Alex said that he didn't do. So, what? Because he said no to you, and I'm not even going to be bothered to go look for the whole full context of exactly what he's saying and why he's saying it. I don't give a shit. The fact that, like, you think this proves something is weird, right? Like, what is this supposed to prove? Whether Matt Dillahunty wouldn't believe it if God did something? Who gives a flying fuck? He's talking about veganism and what he agrees with and what he doesn't what he disagrees with it in. Oh my fucking God. But, you know, if you muddy the waters and make it look like he's unreasonable in other things, then he's unreasonable in that. And if Matt Dillahunty's being unreasonable about that, then that also means that all the other atheists that say similar things to him, like, you know, God, I don't know what would change my mind, then then God would, well, then that also makes them unreasonable by proxy, doesn't it?
Oh dear. Yes.
Like, how is any of this proving any philosophical fucking point other than, do you know what? Matt Dillahunty really butthurt me. And so did fucking Dan Barker, and I really hate it when people use this God of the Gaps argument in one way or another. So I've got to there's still 5 minutes left in this video. I've still got to spend 20 minutes trying to find out why actually the God of the Gaps is their problem and not mine. A reprobate.
So I'd ask an atheist, could it ever be reasonable for someone to believe God exists?
No. No, I don't. Because there's no proof of it. It's all fallacious argumentation that that hinges on you giving their answers to their questions, even though they're leading questions that don't actually ask what they're asking. Like, most people are converted in their childhood age when they have no ability to really make any choices about it because the parents are making their choices for them. And then if they grow a little older and decide not to become religious, there's a great part of Christianity and other religions that ostracize them, you know, demean them, like kick them out, get rid of, like fuck them over, don't let them shop in shops. There's all sorts of shit that goes on, right? You know, like, you know, Kidnap for Christ, with that film from like 2007, 2008, something like that, might be a bit later. You know, were Christians for decades, and I wouldn't be surprised if they're still fucking doing it. Like that fucking, like my kid's got autism. My kid might be gay. My kid is turning into an atheist, so they have him kidnapped and they have him sent to a foreign country where they can be physically and mentally tortured until the God believers enough. I don't think that's a reasonable way to reach a faith. So no, I don't think humans in any way let people have a reasonable idea about faith. I just don't. Everything's about indoctrination and just believe because I do. And hey, Pascal said, just come on, man. It's not a reasonable way. The ontological argument doesn't give you a reasonable belief in God. The cosmological argument doesn't. None of those arguments give you a reasonable belief in God. And especially yours. Because, excuse me, none of them are pointing to your God. No, none of them. The best you can say for a reasonable belief in God is that people could have a reasonable belief in a deistic God. There is no reasonable way for them to believe in your God, because you need to lie, you need to omit, and you need to ask simple, leading questions to simple, easy answers to hard, non-intuitive questions. And if that doesn't fail, you persecute them until they believe.
And if you ask atheistic philosophers, many of them will say, yeah. For example, Graham Oppy writes in his book, Arguing Against Gods, that, quote, there can be reasonable theists, atheists, and agnostics. For after all, there are undeniably sensitive, thoughtful, and intelligent people who fall into all three camps.
How is that saying that there's reasonable reasons to believe in God? It's just saying they're reasonable. Just because he uses the term reasonable, and you're using the term reasonable, doesn't mean jack shit. To be honest, I haven't read the book, and like when I edit it, I might actually read through it, but I probably won't. We'll find out, won't we? But to me, it sounds like he's saying, actually, there's reasonable people to talk to. You know, because you Christians like to quote mine, and you like to make it look like they're saying other things than they actually are. Nothing in what you just said about that man actually says that there are reasonable atheists that reasonably believe in God. It's almost like it's an oxymoron. The two things can't... Well, it's not an oxymoron. They're, like, incompatible being an atheist and believing in a god. They're called agnostics.
The philosopher Thomas Nagel writes the following: I want atheism to be true, and am made uneasy by the fact that some of the most intelligent and well-informed people I know are religious believers.
Let's play that again, just to show he's quote mining.
The philosopher Thomas Nagel writes the following: I want atheism to be true, and am made uneasy by the fact that some of the most intelligent and well-informed people I know are religious believers.
Because he's quote mining. It's fun, isn't it? Isn't it fun every time a Christian quote mines because they can't be bothered to look up the few sentences before and after? Or did he? And he realized that that's not what he's talking about and didn't want to put it across that way because he's already using fallacious things to begin with. So, if we go to goodreads.com, it says that this is from The Last Word by Thomas Nagel, 1997. In speaking of the fear of religion, I don't mean to refer to the entirety of reasonable hostility towards certain established religions and religious institutions, in virtue of their objectionable moral doctrines, social policies, and political influence, nor am I referring to the association of many religious beliefs with superstition and the acceptance of evident empirical falsehoods. I am talking about something much deeper, namely, the fear of religion itself. I speak from experience, being strongly subject to this fear myself. I want atheism to be true, and I am made uneasy by the fact that some of the most intelligent and well-informed people I know are religious believers. I want... It isn't just that I don't want to believe. It isn't just that I don't believe in God, and naturally I hope that I'm right in my belief. It's that I hope there is no God. I don't want there to be a God, and I don't want the universe to be like that. It's almost like he's fucking saying he's afraid that people can be really smart and clever and reasonable and still fall for this fucking bullshit. But of course, the Christian doesn't actually want the full quote of that because they'd rather have a strong atheist say what appears to be nice things about them because they care more about manipulating you than being correct. And we're supposed to look at these people like the high, holy, and fucking good when all they're doing is looking for ways to fool you.
So let me return to the title of this video, which I admit it's a bit of a generalization, but video titles can kind of be that way. I said there's one question atheists can't answer, and that's what would prove God exists. I said it's not helpful to frame the question as what would convince you God exists, since that's more about feelings than rational discourse.
Oh, it's a feeling. Yes, I know all about feelings. Everything's just going fine, and somebody has a feeling.
I'd rather ask an atheist, can a person rationally believe in God? And if so, under what circumstances could that take place? It's not helpful to say, well, under this miracle, this specific miracle, or that specific miracle, it'd be reasonable to believe.
Yeah, so let's just ask a different question and make it easier for us to convince people by saying, well, if it's reasonable for people to believe it because of this, why aren't you reasonable, you unreasonable fuck? That's the whole point of this question he's trying to ask you. The whole reason he wants to put it this way is so he can say to you, why are you being unreasonable then?
Be realistic. Can't you just for half a second be realistic? Now what that means is see reality my way or die.
It's all wordplay. It's all wordplay and fucking with you. They're fucking with your brain. It isn't about proof. It isn't about finding things that actually prove things or show the actual veracity of a fucking claim. The whole point with these cunts is to make it easier for them to fucking whitewash your brain into whatever they want you to think. Because, well, if you choose this word instead of this word, well then actually if I put it across this way, it means this, so God's real, right? You notice not once in this whole fucking thing has he talked about anything that could be even according to proof. All he wants to do, and he's said it over and over again, is all he wants you to do is argue philosophically because he thinks he can hand you your ass philosophically. And he wants his job to be easier because he's a lazy, vain prick.
because those are just examples of sufficient evidence, subjective examples. They aren't objective definitions of what level of evidence would be sufficient for anyone to believe.
So why the fuck, when another Christian says, well, this answered prayer did this and God did this for me, you fucking gush over him like I've been playing with your G-spot for an hour?
Even if that level of evidence is not convincing to everyone. For example, in a Q&A session after my debate with Ben Watkins on the existence of God, Ben said that he'd be open to believing God exists if he personally had an authentic religious experience.
But it's only okay for Christians, right? Because it's only Christians that can have authentic ones, and if an atheist comes to it through it, well then they're a prick, because you don't like hearing the fucking God of the Gaps argument anymore. So, they can't come to it for the same reasons that fucking millions of other Christians can, because it's got to be different rules for them, right? Because you've argued with them and you don't like them. So really, what you want them to do to really show that they actually believe is some kind of metaphorical crawling through the fucking glass, isn't it? Right? Because they have to prostrate themselves in the correct way you want so they can make up for your personal slights that you feel that they've done to you. That's what it's really about, isn't it? It isn't about making sure that people believe, and it isn't making sure that they believe for good reasons. It's so that you can have an easier time fucking doing it, and the people that you think have angered you, you can make them fucking have extra shit they've got to do, as punishment, because you're Lord and fucking arbiter of everything, aren't you?
And he and the Real Atheology team admit that there can be rational believers who come to believe God exists either through religious experience.
Why, you oughta... Let me at him! Here, hold me back. Okay, let me at him!
Or the force of logical arguments.
Fuck off, you cunt! Well, I guess some people... Well, I guess some of you people would actually be alright with, I don't know, coming to God through, religious experiences, but not you, Dan Barker, and not you, Matt Dillahunty, and not you, guy I debated with. If you've personally slighted this cunt, you've got to do more to prove it. Because you've personally slighted him. Because he's the arbiter of everything, you see. Because he's upon high, dispensing justice, hither and thither. What a cunt!
Of course, another person's interior religious experience, it's not going to be very convincing to someone who can't directly see that experience. So
is that the real point? You don't want people like that to come through that. So then if they come to God through a religious experience, when they tell other people that it was because of a religious experience, people are going to make fun of them. So it's not good enough proof to convince other people, so you don't want them to go through it. Is that part of it? Is that what it is? Because you want those people that are so good at arguing for atheism to argue for your side, and you don't want them to come to God in like a way that you would deem bad and easily debunked. Because you would want them to argue with their proficiency for what you want, and specifically what you want, right?
In those cases, what might be more helpful are philosophical arguments for the existence of God. Now, another objection might be that if these philosophical arguments work, kalam, fine-tuning, different moral arguments, contingency, whatever, if they work, well, why doesn't everyone believe God exists?
Because they don't point to your fucking God, and they're so easily debunked anyway. But, because you already believe they're the ultimate proof, right? And you studied it a bit, so you want people to act that way. So why don't people do the things I want them to do? You fucking cunt. I hate this man.
The problem with this objection is that philosophical questions can't be answered with something like an experiment.
Bull motherfucking shit. Of course they can. And they did. That's why philosophy changed. And that's why philosophy now uses science in its reasoning.
That's easily replicated. Even some scientific questions can't be answered this way.
Well, if it can't be answered with the scientific method, it's not a scientific question. Learn what words mean before you use them. I know you think you're dead clever because, what, you've learned enough philosophical arguments, but you know jack shit about science, son. If science can't do it, it ain't science. That's the fucking point. Science can actually figure out everything in the universe. It's almost like it's a physical process, dickhead. And if we learn the physical processes and we learn all the fundamental forces in nature, we can actually work this shit out. You can tell by all the things we've worked out with only a partial portion of everything, of all the knowledge that could be. Look at all we've done, and we don't even know it all yet. So yes, we could prove a lot more with more knowledge, dickhead.
So you're never going to get 100% consensus on these philosophical questions.
You're never going to get 100% consensus on these philosophical questions because they're nebulous intentionally. The whole point of philosophy is to make you think of things. We just worked out a process to work those things out. So philosophy uses those things, except philosophy is only good for you when they're using your type of philosophy, right? If they're using something that proves Christianity in some way, because there's plenty of philosophers that use philosophy and science to go against that. But they're not doing it right, are they? Because they're not doing it the way you want to.
We see this in the recent Phil Papers survey, surveyed hundreds of philosophers, and it shows that a lot of them are evenly divided on some issues. But that doesn't mean that the fact that they don't reach a consensus...
It's not a hint towards anything ever. No, I decided I wasn't going to send him to it, but I sent him because he didn't give me any evidence. But that's not a hint towards anything.
That doesn't mean we shouldn't have a position on these important philosophical questions if we've done our homework and researched it.
As long as you come to my idea of philosophical answers and my idea of philosophical research, well, then we could come to the answers of everything as long as you agree with me, right? Right?
So here's my new question then for an atheist, and one you could ask an atheist or an agnostic or non-believing friend. It'd be this. What is the best argument for the existence of God?
Wow.
There isn't one. There isn't a best argument for the existence of God. Because if God is tangible in any way, we'd be able to find him, and we haven't. So no argument works. Stop asking me how to convert me. It's stupid. It ain't steelmanning your opinions. It's asking the other person, which way could I make you look the silliest the quickest? I'm sorry, I find zero veracity in the Kalam. I find zero veracity in the ontological. I find zero veracity in Pascal's wager. I find zero veracity in all of these fucking theological arguments. Because if all of them are false, because your God isn't real, it doesn't matter about your argument. We can disprove him in other ways. Ashra? Anyone? Asherah? Should we talk about how the Jews were originally a polytheistic religion, and considering that came first, and it would have been closer to the time the words were apparently coming out, that those would in fact be more likely to be true than the things that were written in the 7th century BCE, the editing that happened under Ezra after the Babylonian exile, and all the scribal errors up until like the 14th century. You know, when Gutenberg made the fucking printing press, and we still get those scribal and translation errors to this fucking day. That's why you have so many fucking denominations. That's why you have so many fucking Bibles, because you haven't got a solid piece of fucking proof, and all you've got is arguments that convince people that want to be convinced. So they make another denomination and another denomination, because it's just schism, and it doesn't matter about if it's real or not. It's facts over feelings. It's about what makes you feel warm and fuzzy inside because you're afraid of death and chaos. So instead of doing something to make it better, you think if I believe in God, that it'll make it all right, right? Like, fuck off, you piece of shit.
And what's wrong with it? Or what is the least problematic argument for God? And what's specifically wrong with it?
I just listed off a bunch. But the thing is when you list off a bunch, they go, oh, that's a gish gallop. Even though they do it all the fucking time. The problem is the main problem with all of your arguments is not one of them points to your God, motherfucker. Not one of them says Yahweh, Jehovah, Yaldabaoth, whatever fucking name you want to call him, Elohim, El Shaddai, El, whatever, Yahoo, Yahoos. Doesn't prove any of them, dickhead. Just doesn't. But if you argue philosophically, and you're in an English-speaking country, well, obviously, when you use philosophical terms for God, you're obviously talking about Christian God, right? And Jeebus. Because there's no other gods, right? He's the only one that's real, right? Idiot.
Remember, to show something is wrong with an argument, you need to point out either an untrue premise in the argument or some kind of fallacy in the reasoning, specific fallacy, not just like it's got the gaps. What specific logical fallacy is being committed?
Argue my way! Why can't you argue my way? Don't have your own thoughts and opinions. Argue the way I want you to. That's the way it's been for centuries, right? We dictate on high which bits are okay to say and which bits aren't. And I'm getting annoyed that all you fucking knobheads are starting to have your own thoughts and ideas and not thinking upon these well-solid philosophical ideas that held us in the Dark Ages and the Middle Ages and had almost no technological advance for thousands of years. And then we stopped thinking like that and we had a lot. Hey, who gives a shit about that, right? Who gives a shit about the results that each process gives? One makes you feel warm and fuzzy, even though this cunt's trying to make you think it's not about facts and feelings.
And in that spirit, I hope both atheists and theists will critically examine the reasons that are given for the existence of God, these philosophical arguments that have been presented in different forms over time. You can find them in a lot of different resources. I have some in my book, Answering Atheism.
I just wish you'd all just answer my way. I put it in my book how I want you to argue me. It's like there's a bit in was it? It's a Tiffany book. A Hatful Sky. Before that, We Free Men. There's a witch called Miss Tick. I'm not Mystic. It's Miss Miss Tick. And she's a witch, and she wrote a book on how to catch witches. And what she just says is you catch the witch, and then you tie her up, loosely of course, and then you dunk her in the water, and you walk away immediately, and on the other side you put a nice fresh bit of clothes, and like some food, and she'll never come back again. That's what that book is. That's what his book is. His book is just telling you how to argue with him, so he can best you in a debate. That's all it is.
I'd also recommend The Blackwell Companion to Natural Theology, The Existence of God by Richard Swinburne, and also 5 Proofs for the Existence of God by the Catholic philosopher Ed Feser, among many others. Another book would be How Reason Can Show That God Exists. I think that's a rough title, by Josh Rasmussen. So look at the arguments on either side, see where they work, and try to point out specifically where you think they don't work. Both believers and non-believers should do this. That way we can journey closer to the truth together. So I hope that's helpful for you all, and I hope you all have a very blessed day.
Cunt! Fuck off. Why don't you read these Christian philosopher books, right? Alright, well, how about this? You want reading? I'll give you some fucking reading. You wanna match up reading? Let me just get to my Audible, okay? Yes, I listen to audiobooks. If you don't like it, suck a dick. So how about this? How about we listen to things like Eric Klein's After 1177 BC, The Survival of Civilizations, which is a sequel to, what's it called? Eric H. Klein's 1177 BC, The Year Civilization Collapsed. It's about the Bronze Age collapse. That actually talks about, how different civilizations around the time that the Exodus was supposed to have happened prove that the Exodus didn't fucking happen. How about that? And it's not even about that. It's not even about the Bible. It's about the Bronze Age collapse. You can just infer other things because it's talking about the Sea Peoples kicking the shit out of everyone that we have proof for. So we could read like history books like that, or like you could read stuff from David Brack, like he's got great courses books about Gnosticism, about different versions of Christianity that actually like were around, before fucking proto-Orthodox won out in the Council of Nicaea and stuff. You've got books like Lost Christianities, The Battles for Scripture in the Face We Never Knew by Bart D. Ehrman. And one of those books, like he has his pop books, which is for everyone. And one of these books is actually more one of his actual studious books that are more for scholars and have very different kinds of information in it. It's almost like professors have 2 styles of books, and Bart Ehrman does both of them. You can look at things like The Great Courses, Human Prehistory and First Civilizations by Brian M. Fagan, which talks about the starts of various civilizations, from fucking early prehistory stuff all the way to like Egypt and Greece and stuff like that. You got David Brack's Understanding the New Testament, The Apocryphal Jesus. They're both by David Brack, and they're both great courses. I mean, you could learn about epigenetics from the great courses. There's so many things you could fucking read. You could read, there's like Bob Breyer's History of Ancient Egypt on the great courses. There's a History of the Bible, The Book of Faith by John Barton. Like there's so much shit you could read. This is just page 1 of my fucking Audible. You know what I mean? Should I go through some more books that you should all fucking read? Yes. Yes, I am. That's how I'm going to finish this video. Triumph of Christianity as a different way that Christianity is a great courses series by Bart Ehrman about how Christianity formed itself and how it changed itself and how it won over different things and how it eventually took over most of the modern world. You got Weavers, Scribes and Kings, A New History of the Ancient Near East by Amanda H. Podanani. She was even in the Bangles. That's why they wrote Walk Like an Egyptian. And that's talking about things that happened in the Middle East. You got books like Babylon, Mesopotamia, Birth of Civilization by Paul Karawazik. You know, the list goes on and on and on and on. You could read things by Cynthia Chatham and Joseph Lamb. There's so many things that talk about exactly how your religion came about. And we don't need to talk philosophically. We can talk about the actual texts we found, the actual, ruins we found. We can talk about histories of battles and where things happened and why things happened. And we can talk about all these things that are real bits of fact, and we can infer things from them all fucking day long, right? And we don't need to use philosophy because we have dug into the ground a lot, right? And I think really at the heart of this, and before I sign off, I'd just like to say, I think that this video does nothing more than to prove exactly how ignorant people can be when they think they found an answer. There's a reason. Yes, not every atheist is dead clever, right? But there's a reason that atheists tend to know more. And that's because we haven't got all the answers. And it kind of annoys us. Right? Now, you people want to think you have the answer, so you need to find all the reasons why it must be the answer. That's why science doesn't matter, and why philosophy matters. And it's not just because it's making it easier on you, it's because you think you have the answer, so science only gives you answers. If you think you have the answer, you need the process to the answer. That's why you philosophize. But science doesn't have the answer. That's why it sciences, and it keeps on finding out that you're wrong about shit. And, it's weird. It'd be like, I don't know. I'm just done. I've been recording this for like 2.5 hours. I'm just so fucking done. So, I hope you all enjoyed that. I shall all see you sometime soon, depending on how many parts this video's in. So, it could be next week. Might be doing some Ray Comfort. I really need to do that Brian Holdsworth video at some point. Or I could just wait till the new year. I don't know. We'll see. Bye, everybody.